We are now live streaming. All of our attendees are in, so we can get started.
Okay. So I can start to welcome everybody, Sheila.
Absolutely, take it away.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I've said hello to many people already this afternoon. So let me say again, good evening and welcome to this session. We're working hard, as you are working hard, and I want to thank our chairs who worked very hard already and will continue to work very hard. And that is Commissioner Blair. Are you with us? Where are you, Commissioner Blair?
I'm up here. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's good to see you. And Commissioner Joel, are you there, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I want to thank you all for the work that you do and will continue to do. And I want you to know how much I appreciate it, because this is not easy work by any stretch of the imagination. And I never take lightly the work that, folks who are in your positions like yours never take that lightly at all, because there's too many demands on your time. And we want to make sure that people appreciate what you do. Some of you may know already that our former fire chief, who was the fire chief when I was the mayor, passed away just a few days ago. Fire Chief Elby, you all remember Fire Chief Elby? He was a great guy, and I loved working with him. He was in Sarasota, Florida, is when I reached out to him and asked him to continue work, come back and work with us here in the District of Columbia. And he agreed to do it. And in my opinion, anyway, did a fantastic job. He was very clear about the things that were important to him. And people worked hard to be able to make sure that they understand what was important to him. And he did a fantastic job, in my opinion, as the fire chief. And of course, I was devastated when I found out just 3 days ago that he passed away. So his funeral services will be held at the Armory, as appropriately so, on Saturday, the 5th of March, I guess it is. So please mark your calendars for that. And please try to come by and just wish him and his family well at this point. So,
Councilmember Gray, actually his services are next Saturday, March 12th, not this Saturday, next Saturday, March 12th.
Oh, Saturday the 12th. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes.
All right. Want to make sure that we keep clarify that. Saturday the 12th will be his funeral services. And we all should be there. I will be there, and others hopefully will be there to be able to wish his family well. He has a wonderful family. I knew his family extremely well, and to wish them Godspeed in terms of working with the devastating loss that he's involved in. So thank you so much for him and his family. Thank you so much for that. So I just want to say good evening to everybody and wish you well this evening. Those who are with us, thank you so much for coming to be a part of the efforts this evening. I've said hello to a number of you already, and we'll want to say it again as we move forward this evening. So Commissioner Blair, Commissioner Joel, both of you are here. So I want to ask you all if you'd like to take over the meeting at this point and continue us on. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Gray.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am your co-chair this evening, along with Commissioner Blair. I have the privilege to be able to co-chair this meeting this evening. And in the spirit of Councilmember Gray, just want to echo the same sentiments about our beloved member who have pass on the glory. I just returned back from a funeral myself. I lost my brother-in-law, who was an excellent gentleman, a very good representation what it means to be a brother-in-law. He was more like a brother. So it's a somber moment for me and my family also as we recognize his life. Nonetheless, we are here this evening for this great task, this great assignment of redistricting. And our focus tonight will be on 7D, 6A, and 6B. Also want to acknowledge all the task force members who are here. As our beloved council member stated, this is a hard job. It's a heavy lifting that cannot be done by one individual. But I can say this here, I can say one of my challenges, I want to be vulnerable here. One of my challenges are the emails. But I see so many names and so many people is doing so much great good and contributing and saying this, that, and the third about the work we're doing now. And it is very much appreciative for all the Washingtonians, we as here in Ward 7, the best ward within our city, right? The best ward within our city. And we're doing a great job.
Joel.
Thank you all for doing that. Yes, sir. We're doing the best we can. And I'm just honored to be a part of the mix. Having stated that, I want to transition at this moment to my co-chair person, Commissioner Blair, who has been it's been an honor working with you. And this is our third public listening session, but we do have 2 more sessions where will be followed by, look out for I always make a mistake with this word right here. Forgive my tongue. What is it? The pool, the doodle. I don't know. What is it? Doodle pool, something like that. It's a funny word. I don't know which one I'm saying here, right? But we have another pool coming up that will deal with our next 2 sessions that will deal specifically with the task force member. I will not hold you any longer. I will turn over to Commissioner Blair. Co-chair, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Castone. Before we jump into the engagement of interacting with our public this evening, I just want to take 15 seconds to thank Councilmember Gray for putting together a spectacular task force team. I couldn't ask for a better group of leaders in Ward 7 and our incoming new leaders to Ward 7. Great group. You guys did a good job. I don't know who's responsible on your staff or you or together, but you did a bang up job putting this crew together. So we're going to start with just a couple of simple things on how we're going to operate this evening. It's no different than the previous 2 listening sessions, but I do understand and recognize that we have some new people joining us this evening who may not be familiar with how we operate for these listening sessions. Our intention is to listen to the public. And when I say public, I'm speaking of everyone in attendance who is not a task force member. But we're going to lead off with task force members from 7D, 6A, and 6B, who are going to give us an overview of the current situation for the areas that they represent. So we're going to take them one at a time. 7D is going to lead off. I know 6 comes before 7, but because of the sequence and the way we're moving from east to west, 7 is the next one up for an overview. So if you are attending as a general member of the public, 3 minutes if you would like to comment on share your maps or share your ideas and suggestions. 3 minutes is what we're allowing. If you are a commissioner and you're out there in the audience, we're glad to have you. And as you know, we typically allow commissioners a little bit more time. So we're allowing commissioners 5 minutes. And then after we've heard from all 3 representatives, we will circle back and have time for interactions with the task force members to contribute or respond to what we may hear from our public tonight. And so leading us off tonight is, first of all, I'll say all 3 presenters tonight, they're either current or former commissioners. So they have a lot of knowledge and information, a lot of knowledge to share about their respective areas. Leading us off is from 7D, former Commissioner Justin Leaney, and we're going to hear from him. We'll listen to the public, then we'll go to 6A, listen to the public again, go to 6B, and do the same thing. Okay, take it away.
Thank you, co-chairs, and thank you, Councilmember Gray. Good to see you. And thank you, task force members and members in attendance. I saw a few familiar names from 7D, Commissioner Douglas. Hope you're having a good evening. I'm just going to give a short presentation on how 7D has changed the last several years, assuming my screen share will work. Oh, there we go. Helps if I know how to use it. So good evening, everyone. I'm Justin Leaney. I served as commissioner for 7D07 Paradise and Parkside for 2 terms from 2016 to, well, from 2015 to the beginning of 2019. 7D stretches across a pretty wide area from Kingman Park in the west all the way to Fort Chaplin in the east. And the area around the shrimp boat is as the commissioner from 7D05 often says. In my presentation tonight, I'm going to provide an overview of our community, explain how natural boundaries shape ANC 7D. I'm going to describe how our population has grown in the last decade and how we anticipate it will grow in the coming decade. And then I have several discussion questions and identified several possible challenges I definitely am interested in hearing from the community about. I think it would inform the task force's work. Just to be upfront about my personal process, I'm not touching any SMD maps until after we're done with these listening sessions, because I'm very much interested in hearing what the community has to say before I put pen to paper. So first of all, welcome to 7D virtually. One of my favorite parts of the District of Columbia and Ward 7. ANC 7D is special. We have a number of important historic African-American communities in our part of town. Eastland Gardens, Kenilworth, Kingman Park, Mayfair, and River Terrace all bring very important stories and history in terms of advocacy and self-determination. Our community is especially important to the history of the African-American environmental movement, with advocacy in neighborhoods like River Terrace and Eastland Gardens against the power plant that polluted the air and the garbage dump. George Gurley, for example, is a prominent figure in the history of the African-American environmental movement, and it's not all. In addition, we have some really beautiful natural resources. We have Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens. You can see my lotus blossom up there. If you've never been, you should go during the summer sometime. We're also home to some of Ward 7's fastest growing communities. A little bit later, I'm going to talk about how the population has grown, especially in Kenilworth Parkside. We are served by 3 metro stations, and also are home to 295 and a number of important bus routes. Transportation access and issues are an important issue to this community. And we were the first ANC to span both banks of the Anacostia River when in the early 2000s, Kingman Park was districted into 7D, or into Ward 7 and ANC 7D. I just want to give a shout out to the other 7D representatives on the task force, Commissioner Blair and Commissioner Felder, as well as Melissa Fries from River Terrace and Nisha Petruni from Friends of Kingman Park. Thank you, everyone. So just to give you an overview, we're a pretty wide-stretching ANC. We stretch from west of the river in Kingman Park all the way over to the Benning Road Metro Station, over near Fort Chaplin Apartments and the Shrimp Boat. That covers a significant area of the District of Columbia. We also stretch from East Capitol all the way up to the Maryland state line. And this map sort of illustrates what communities, for example, we have Kingman Park that's represented by 2 community organizations, and then we have civic associations and community organizations such as Eastland Gardens, Parkside, River Terrace, and Central Northeast. ANC 7D is also contains a mixture of townhouse neighborhoods, single family home neighborhoods, and large apartment complexes like Mayfair and Kenilworth. We have a variety of different types of communities, and I think that's one of the things that makes us special here. I also want to talk briefly about how natural boundaries shape ANC 7D. This map shows areas where there are parks, which we have quite a few large national parks, as well as major highways, roadways, and the like. In the previous sessions, we talked about how natural boundaries can make for clear beginnings and ends of communities, and also how they can impose some challenges if you're trying to bring communities together, which are sort of geographically separated. When we talk about natural boundaries, 7D is really separated into 3 major bands. So the furthest east are the areas east of the railroad tracks, and that's 7D05, 7D06, and a large portion of 7D03, and those include some of Central Northeast and Deanwood. The middle band is Kenilworth, Parkside, and River Terrace. These are kind of unique communities because we're located between the highway and the river. So it makes them a little more isolated, and we have some common issues with transportation access. And then our neighbors to the west are Kingman Park, which is our community west of the river. And so we bring together communities from pretty large geographical differences or distances. I think 7D really has illustrated sort of the challenges and promises of that problem, right? So we bring together people from wide parts of the district, and we're able to talk about issues that affect every corner of 7D. At the same time, my experience as a commissioner has been, because we cover such a large area, it can be a little more challenging to sort of know the insides and outsides of the issues affecting each community. We developed ways to work around it, but I think as the task force thinks about it and as the community talks about it, these are some things to think about. So that's the background. The next part I want to talk about briefly is how has 7D changed in the last decade? As I mentioned, we are home to a number of different types of communities. Some are well-established and stable communities, but others are experiencing rapid growth. I put together this map to really show how big each of the SMDs are in 7D. And the ones that are in green and blue are pretty close to what the law says they need to be. Kingman Park is slightly smaller than the minimum, but it's only 50 people, 44 people. And the 2 blue districts are just slightly outside the tolerances, but we have some communities with significant growth. I'll point to 7D05. The area around Benning Road has experienced significant, pretty major growth, if you're familiar with the area. Large apartment buildings going up. 7D03, that would be Commissioner Douglas's district. She's been on all these calls. That district has seen quite a bit of growth as well. They're 400 people over. And then 7D02, that's Eastland Gardens and Mayfair. They've seen that they're slightly over. And then 7D07, my old district, is 3,000 people in it right now, which is a lot for a single member district to be. We're only supposed to have 2,100, but there's been lots of growth there. So just to break that down, some of the highlights here, 7D03 is 300 people over, 7D05 about 450, 460 over, and then 7D07 is 900 people over. I also, when I was looking at the numbers today, I found out that 7D07 was the fastest growing single member district east of the river. The only ones that are really growing a lot faster than that are pretty much in the Navy Yard area where there's been the really big buildings going up. In terms of future growth, there's a major development in Kenilworth Courts that's probably going to add around 200 new homes in the next decade. Part of that's groundbreaking tomorrow, actually. The Parkside development is still humming along, and they're expecting another 500 to 1,000 new homes before that fills out sometime in the next decade. And also for folks a little more familiar with the areas around Benning Road, there's a lot of development starting to cook up all along that corridor from Kingman Park all the way over to the Shrimp Boat, and I'm sure parts farther south and east as well. So in my preparation for this meeting, I made several observations about some things that the community may want to think about or provide some feedback on. First, we will probably need to put a new single member district in the Kenilworth Parkside neighborhood just to balance populations between SMDs. All three of the SMDs for the area are oversized to varying degrees. I think there's about 1,600 people that we can't accommodate within current SMDs. For those of you who were on the first listening session, there was a pretty strong message from the Deanwood community that they wanted to have, they wanted to simplify their boundary with 7D to include, at the very least, Deanwood Metro Station, but possibly up to Kenilworth Avenue. Yeah, I think there's a real question about what does that mean for 7D if the task force does that. And that's, I think, something the task force would benefit from hearing. Another topic which I think will need to be discussed is that it's entirely possible there will be a proposed ANC west of the river, given the number of residents who now live in that area. How does that affect Kingman Park? And should Kingman Park be a part of that or not? That would be something that the task force needs to hear. And then, of course, more general things that apply to all ANCs. You know, are there any SMD boundaries within 7D that are really difficult for the community and for commissioners to represent in terms of getting access to constituent services or whatnot? And then, are there any other areas external to 7D that 7D really needs to be a part of 7D? I don't know of any personally, but I would definitely be interested in hearing about that, and believe that the task force would benefit from that as well. So I'm going to shut off my screen share. I'm assuming that it's off now. Chair, are you seeing, is my screen share off?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I am going to stop talking now because I've covered everything, and we'll be taking notes of what the questions and comments are, and I'm available for answers.
Thank you, Commissioner Leedy. If we have any questions, any concerns, anyone that wants to speak in reference to what they saw in the presentation, or they have a proposed map that they created themselves that they'd like to talk about, now's the time. You can raise your hand in the chat, and Chief of Staff Bunn will be helping us monitor any hands that we see raised.
Yes, Chair Blair, I did see Commissioner Douglas's hand raised, but I don't see it raised any longer. I don't know if she dropped. Her hand isn't raised anymore. But Justin, you're getting kudos in the chat. Great presentation. Great job. Folks want a copy of the presentation. So no questions. But one of the task force members has a question. So, Dr. Dean has a question.
I could barely hear, so I think you called on me, so you didn't tell me to be quiet.
I did, yes.
Oh,
yes.
okay. I want to get my questions out now because I have to switch over to another meeting, Ward 7A Council. So I think one of the fundamental questions we're going to have to address, because I think it has implications across the decisions around every ANC, is there going to be a separate ANC for west of the river or not? And what are the implications of it being separate, it being integrated pieces from both sides of the wards being brought into an ANC? I think that's going to have a lot of impact everywhere else. I mean, I know in our 7B presentation, it limited us and our ability to think about certain things because that question has not been addressed. So we had to make some trade-offs, and we've received a lot of feedback from our community of who wants to be a part of 7B, but we're limited by that conversation. So I really think that's one of the central things we're going to need to address so that everyone can kind of figure out. I'm just going to put my opinion on the record. I do not think that west of the river should have their own ANC. I think it sends a terrible message. And I think we need to be looking for ways to make sure that we're completely integrated and unified. But that's just one person's opinion, but I think it has ripple effects on, for us, like the trade-off we had to make between Fort Davis and Greenway. And, but we were trying to work through that with those type of limitations.
Chairs, you have another hand raised from Task Force Member Nisha Petruni.
Hi, thanks. So I also wanted to, I'm Vice President of Friends of Kingman Park, which is one of the civic associations for the Kingman Park neighborhood. And I just wanted to note that our community members, voting members of our civic association did write a letter when redistricting was happening, asking to consider keeping our SMD as geographically contiguous. So I think in response to Dr. Dean's comment and question, I do think that's an important point for us to consider, how it impacts decision-making or voting and how we structure 7D since it does span both banks of the river. I know most of our voting members were in support of having some amount of other SMDs or commissioners on our side, but I think it's something that's important for us to talk about, all of the benefits and also the challenges that Dr. Dean raised.
Let's see, Chair, Task Force Member Keith Tyree has his hand raised as well.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I just kind of want to echo some of the concerns that my fellow subcommittee member, Dr. Dean, mentioned in regards to having a ANC that's fully just west of the river. It's about unity, and I think unity is very crucial and important. We are all one Ward 7. Having the distinction between a west of the river ANC versus the east of the river ANC is something that is very concerning for me. So I do hope that today, as we are hearing more testimonies from the other SMDs that are our new neighbors west of the river, that if this is something in their thinking pattern and their thought pattern, that we can kind of understand the rationales behind why they would prefer to have a commission area west of the river instead of joining the larger ANCs altogether east of the river. Thank you for my time.
Chairs, I don't see, well, Commissioner Blair has her hand raised.
Yeah, I'm co-chair, but I'm also commissioner of S&D 7001. And so I will say that no one will understand the challenges of being on a commission when you're the only S&D on geographically separated from the rest of the commission. So I come from a very unique perspective. I don't know that there's anyone else on the call tonight because I can't see who else is out there. I can just see numbers, but there's some serious challenges in trying to function because there are issues that we face over here that this larger community on this side, it's just a different set of issues that we come across continuously. And just to give you an example, I won't go into details, but I actually brought an issue to my commission and I couldn't even get a second to bring it to a vote. This was an issue unique to my community. So that told me that they didn't understand because they're not familiar. They don't have the knowledge of what happens over here. That's just one example. I'll give you another general example. I attend a lot of meetings in Ward 7, other than, just my SMD commission meetings. I can't even recall ever having anyone invited from 5D, which is our police district, to speak. It's always 6D, 6D, 6D. So now we not just have more of 5D, we've got, I believe it's 1D that polices Hill East. So for 20 years, Kingman Park has been part of Ward 7, but we haven't always been treated like part of Ward 7. So now all of a sudden, it's let's unite. Where has this unity been for 20 years? And I'll stop right there for now.
Commissioner Co-Chair Blair, I don't see any other task force member hands raised, but we do have a hand raised in the community as well as a couple comments in the chat. So would you like me to move there or? You're muted, Co-Chair Blair.
Hands raised, if you see hands raised.
Yeah, the only hand I see raised is Task Force Member Dr. Dean, and then there's some questions from the community in the chat.
Oh, well, let's get the questions first before we jump back to Dr. Dean.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the first hand that I see is Dorothy Douglas. So let me find her. Give me 1 second. 1 second. Okay. Commissioner Douglas, you should be able to speak now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, everybody, and God bless everybody. Y'all said a pretty smile, Miss Sheila. And I wanted to say to Miss Blair, I love your red dress. It's very pretty on you. And thank you so much. You always do look good, but that's even outstanding. But what I wanted to say is so true that unity is important. And we have, you say in 7D07, I think that's Mr. Wendell Fowler, that's his ANC single member district. You're over 300 or 700 people there. But I can remember when they weren't really nothing over there, but just just clear grass. So my question, then you're saying 7D03 is over 300. But if you, what you're including people that's not there as of yet, those persons has been transferred out to other locations that are receiving with vouchers and stuff. So right now with the groundbreaking tomorrow, they're still putting up new buildings. So I'm just wondering what bodies are you counting because they're not there. So a lot of them have already left. So you adding bodies that's not been counted. So that's not accurate. So I want to be clear on that. I don't want to just make numbers up to say this is what we have when the bodies are really not there. They've been gone for a while. So that we're renovating Kenilworth. So I just wonder where that comes from. And I want to thank you all so much. It would be helpful for me as an ANC person for single member district to have this map that we're discussing now so that we can make some changes or do some modification. If you would provide that to us to share that information to our residents so they can be aware of what's going on. So I think that would be a great part too, because I don't know how to put nothing together or whatever you're all saying, but if you already have it together where I can share what needs to be so they can understand what it is, because I'm still learning myself. So because I'm not an expert and I know you all are not, but I appreciate what you're doing. But it would have been very helpful if we'd had training way before this. And maybe you'll look at this later on in the future or along the way. Thank you very much.
Co-chairs, can I respond to Commissioner Douglas?
Sure, go ahead.
Good evening. Turn my camera on. Hey, good evening, Commissioner Douglas. Good to hear from you.
Yes, it's good to hear from you too. And I will also, while you're on, I remember the turnaround. I noticed turnaround in the traffic. So the main thing too, and that's another issue, how the community gonna get out. So we've been working on that project for a while,
right.
Lynn's Justin. So I just want to say thank you for all that you've done in the past and what you're doing now. Okay, I'll wait for you.
Help out. I was going to, my first answer was I'll send you my map and my presentation, and I'm happy to go over anything with you on that. In terms of the population numbers, those are what we got from the Census Bureau, and that's what we're being asked to work with. So yeah, that number is going to bounce around quite a bit for the reasons you mentioned. In reality, it's going to bounce around because people are moving in and out, and they're going to be building a lot in the future.
Yeah, well, they already moved out. That's what I was just saying, because when they got those census, they probably got them just before they moved out. So that's what I'm saying. It's nobody there now. So that's why I just want to know how I think you need a count at this point. So you can't rely on that. No windows are really zooming over there, because when I was a chairperson back in the days that when it first started, so was city interest, and I was on that board. So I just want to let you know too that I know he has a lot too. But my question, I think we all need to sit down and explain to the people how this actually works. They're still confused. They don't know how this process really works to redistricting. So is there any way you all can simplify this to make sure that the community can understand what's going on? Because I'm just want to explain that to you, because I want to make sure they know what's going on. And I appreciate you too. And,
sure thing, Commissioner. I'll reach out to you.
Okay. And all right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll reach out to you. We can talk offline.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Bond. Thank you, Commissioner Blair.
You're welcome. Thank you, Commissioner Douglas.
Okay, Co-Chair Blair, there's another hand raised, and then I'll go to the chat. Tander, I don't want to mispronounce the last name. So, Tander, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Trying to turn on my video, but apparently I cannot on this. My name is Chandra J. Raman. I was chair of ANC 6B for two terms, and I wanted to speak a little bit about the contiguous issue. While I appreciate the comments about unity and across bounds. I think there's some functional issues that need to be talked about. One is 6A and 6B have been working for a long time on the issues related to the speeding and the traffic accidents that occur on 17th Street. And currently, as some of the proposed maps are, it would have, I believe, two different ANCs that would then kind of have a say over it. And I think we need to keep in mind that there are communities such as Kingman Park, such as Rosedale, such as the eastern part of Capitol Hill and Capitol Hill North that share similarities. And so I'm would advocate for a joint 6-7 ANC that utilizes the historic district boundary line, which is the Capitol Hill Historic District boundary line, as a way of doing that, that creates a hybrid 6-7 ANC that crosses wards, that addresses what came up at the actual ward hearing from many, many residents in currently 6B10 and 6B09, that Capitol Hill is a community as a whole, and that the issues that are here are synonymous with the communities of the people that live here. Now, the reason I selected the historic boundary was fair. It was a rational one, which is that issues to the west of the historic line, obviously, any of the planning and zoning issues that are there would have to have historic preservation knowledge and understanding. Whereas east of that line, we don't often deal with many of those. And so it seemed to be a natural border that was already available in current zoning and planning regulations that would allow for a good sizable ANC to be created west of the Anacostia River, and that is contiguous, and that where the residents in that area share common challenges, common types of applications. And I think it's valuable that residents in a particular area know that they're going to be treated fairly and the same, such that a neighbor on one side of the block will be treated the same as a neighbor on the other side of the block, whether it's building a third-story addition or a variety of issues that they come across, such as 17th Street, and certainly the development of Reservation 13, which many members of, at the time, ANC 6B worked on to have a 10-year, to have a strategic plan and an overall arching plan for that area to be realized. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. Thank you very much for hearing me today.
All right, Co-Chairs Blair and Castone. No other hands raised, but there are some comments in the chat that I just wanted
Sheila,
to.
I have to go, so can I just say one thing and then I have to leave. I'm so sorry. Please.
Oh, the Co-Chairs.
Blair, may I just speak because I need to go to my Ward 7 Ed Council meeting?
Yes, sure, go right ahead.
It'll be quick. I totally understand what you're saying. I get what you're saying in terms of not being able to get your issues raised to the level of concern of the entire ANC. I think there are communities who feel that very same way within each ANC. I don't think the issue of being east or west of the river, separate or combined, eliminates that. There are always, I think we have to be on guard and to look for that. I know my community has felt that way at times in our ANC. I know 7B01 has felt that way at times. So so I think the challenge is to address that issue, but not to divide on some lines that I think send some problematic messages to our community as a whole. I have to go. I thank you all. I appreciate it.
This is Chandra J. Raman again. If I could add one more thing, which I failed to mention, which is that we worked very hard to ensure that Joel Castone was elected to the DC jail. I strongly believe that the DC jail deserves its own single member district commissioner. However, the rest of this works out, I strongly believe that they should have unique and separate representation for the DC jail. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Coaches Blair, give me 1 second. There's another Commissioner Rebecca Morris has her hand raised. Allow to talk. Okay, I'm gonna have to promote her for a second so she can ask her question. Give me 1 second.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I do have just like a comment on whether the east of the river and the west of the river. I kind of think it should be combined, and it can be done with the awareness of, for instance, how you said that Kingman Island it's in a separate police district. If someone's aware of that, then people, your commission would invite those people to be those police officers or whatever issues to that commission. I remember during the redistricting, when a lot of the people who were a part of Kingman Island said that they didn't want to be a part of Ward 7, their issue was, well, they already felt separated. They felt like that their issues wouldn't be listened to, or they wouldn't get things across. I think having it combined and just having all parties being aware of what the issues are and what goes on, I think things could happen in that strategic way. So they will feel a part of the ward. That's just my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Morris. All right, coaches, I am going to move to the chat if that is okay with you.
Sure, go right ahead. To the chat we go.
All right. Actually, there is a community member by the name of Bryn Barnett. One of her questions was, other than unity, why is a separate west of the river ANC problematic? And I will try to find her. I can give her permission to talk if you wanted more context, but that was her question in the chat.
If she would like to come off mute and further.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, hold on. Ms. Barnett, you have the floor.
Great, thank you so much. Hi there, everyone. I live in 6B 10, very close to Francis Campbell, and have been fairly involved throughout the process of redistricting. Trying to understand, obviously some of the issues that Ward 7 members had raised during the redistricting process. And also, sharing and learning about the concerns of others in my community, east of the or west of the river. Sorry. And I asked the question because I had just seen in the chat, simply the statement that a west of the river ANC is problematic, and a couple of others who spoke talked about, how having a west of the river ANC would prevent unity. And I just was curious, I guess I understand that, but there have to be other ways that unity is promoted among, within a ward, when we're talking about, a contiguous area, a community that faces the same issues in terms of, as Chandra mentioned, traffic calming and businesses and other resources and the Planning and Zoning Commission and all of these things that are usually, when you're looking at geographic boundaries, don't necessarily kind of cross over and can make things even more, that would definitely bog down a planning and zoning meeting if you had to deal with, up to, 10 to 15 ANC SMDs, talking about the different building projects. So I guess I just wondered if some of those folks who had expressed concerns about, having a west of the river ANC, single AMC, if they could expand upon what those concerns are, because I think, there are several of us that are well-versed on all of these issues. And I mean, everyone seems to be very well-versed on all of these issues. I haven't, this is my first listening session, but I guess I'm just hoping to better understand if we could be a little bit more specific or just expand a little bit upon that. And I know that Sheila, you had mentioned that we will have an opportunity to review some proposed maps before they're final. Will there be another listening session at that point as well?
So I'll let co-chairs Blair and Castone answer that question. I'm just here to facilitate.
Your time.
We started from the beginning to plan. We planned out to have 3 listening sessions. Then there's going to be 2 sessions where we're actually going to have discussions around a set of maps. And so it's task force, basically a task force roundtable. The public is definitely invited. The public can definitely contribute to the conversation, but the purpose of these first 3 meetings is to hear from the public. And if the public had prepared some maps to share, we would review those maps or give them the opportunity to explain the maps that they had prepared, because it's our intention is to not, we didn't want to put our program and say, here, public, this is what we think you should do. We want to hear from the public, them telling us what they think we should do in terms of redistricting for the new Ward 7. I have personally not looked at any maps because I didn't want to be influenced. The first time I'm actually going to look at a map will be this weekend. I've heard there are some maps that are in the mapping tool, but I want to hear from the public before I look at maps. That was my personal way of approaching this. I won't speak for Commissioner Castone as the co-chair and his way of looking at mapping, but if anyone from the public had prepared a map, we would be willing to do a screen share tonight.
All right, co-chair Blair, you have another hand raised from first initial A, last name Bright. You have the floor.
Hi, good evening. This is Ardely Wright. I'm the former commissioner for 7007 prior to Mr. Felder taking the role last year and immediately preceding Justin Leamy. So I have a couple thoughts. The first thing that I'll start with is with respect to the future of 7007. I do believe that the current makeup does warrant, and future residential composition does warrant 2 different SMDs. And I do have some ideas that I've shared directly with Justin on what that might look like going forward if it were to split. And I'll articulate those here tonight. I didn't specifically make a new map, but Parkside is, I think it's easy to follow when I share what I have to say. But yes, I do believe that it should be two different SMDs, and what I recommend is that there be an SMD that includes the Victory Square apartments, the K Hovnanian townhomes, there are 100 of those, the Grove apartments. This will also include any residential activity that may be erected on the mega plot on Kenilworth, between Kenilworth Terrace and Kenilworth Avenue. And then I also think that it is worth extending the SMD to cross Kenilworth Avenue and Minnesota Avenue to include Grant Street, Galt Place, and Hayes Street to 42nd Street. I think the continuity of the development that's taking place there in terms of the economic and commercial development that's to come complements the commercial development that is still being developed in Parkside. So that would be kind of the first SMD. The second SMD would include the Metro Towns townhomes, Paradise Apartments, Mayfair Apartments, and the 25, I think it's called, I forget what it's called. It's the newer townhomes that have the rooftop decks that are on Parkside Place. And again, extending over Minnesota Avenue to include part of the streets that I just stated, Hayes, Galt, and Grant between Minnesota and 42nd. The reason that I think that Metro Towns and Paradise and Mayfair should be grouped as a single SMD is that part of the Metro Towns townhomes are owned by the DC Housing Authority, and there are units or entire buildings within the Mayfair and Paradise complexes that are owned by DCHA. And so there are some very unique issues that are associated with having that ownership. And when engaging with DCHA, it's just easier to do that as a single SMD as opposed to multiple individuals trying to tackle the same problems that are coming up and kind of unique to a specific segment of residents. I also want to say that I do acknowledge Commissioner Blair's kind of concerns that she has raised with respect to her SMD, almost feeling like the stepsister of the commission, in that, you know, some of the things that she has tried to raise and getting attention in prior discussions just got sidelined. And so I do understand that there are some unique concerns there that don't necessarily fit with the rest of 7D. However, I do think that there are some things that kind of connect us, to include, you know, the activity and issues that are associated with the river, you know, the Pepco cleanup, Kingman Island, the extension of the streetcar. And I think having Commissioner Blair's voice, the 7D01 voices to continue to help, you know, shape the activity and cleanup and any type of development associated with those areas that I just pointed out, I think would be very helpful to 7D as a whole. So losing Kingman Island, losing 7D01, I think would be hurtful to 7D as a whole. But I do recognize that there are some unique circumstances that don't necessarily, you know, fit with the composition and design of the rest of 7D. And I'll pause there.
Thank you, Ms. Bright. Commissioner Blair, we have another question from a Tyler Wilson. So give me a second to promote. Tyler, you have the floor. Tyler, if you're speaking, you're muted. Okay, well, maybe Tyler changed his mind. Okay. Oh, Tyler,
Hi, I'm
can you
sorry.
hear us?
I'm not in a very good place to talk right now. I did type a comment into the comment thing.
I will find it and read your comment. All right. So, Chair Blair, let me try to find Tyler's. So Tyler's question is, what are the criteria as laid out in the ANC law as it relates to making the ANC boundaries and SMDs? Is there anything beyond 1-309.03? I don't know.
I will say that I'm not aware of any additional ANC laws per se. We're operating under the instructions given to us through the subcommittee for redistricting, which did not mention any specific laws regarding ANC boundaries from ANC laws regarding the composition of boundaries.
And Commissioner Blair, what I will do is drop into the chat information from the subcommittee on what each task force was tasked to do as it relates to ANC rejoin. So maybe that will answer Tyler's question. Let me see. I don't think I see any other questions in the chat, but there are lots of comments. But I don't think I see any other questions, more so commentary or thoughts for the task force to consider. But you do have a couple hands raised from your task force members. Your hand is raised, Commissioner Blair. Task Force Member Keith Towery's hand is raised, as well as Task Force Member Leahy's hand is raised.
Okay,
You're
let me
muted.
take myself off mute. In reference to the perceived or thought that there might be some loss in not having SMD 7D or one part of 7D, I can't think of a more knowledgeable person about Kingman Island and the river other than Melissa Fries. So there's no loss. Melissa is probably light years ahead of me as far as her historical knowledge. As long as she's part of River Terrace, you've got a connection to the river, you've got a connection to Kingman Island. She's very involved with that aspect. And as a matter of fact, I often see her at the same meetings that I attend. I think that's probably the first way that I met Melissa was through some common meetings outside of commission meetings. But I just want to reiterate, no one will understand what it's like to be in the position of the commissioner of SMD 7001. For the last 20 years, we've been the only section, with the exception of 7F07, the only ones over here. And it's been a challenge that I can't even describe. It's just unimaginable. So anyone who has a different opinion, you're entitled to your opinion, but you haven't walked the walk.
So Commissioner Blair, there's Task Force Member Laney and Task Force Member Tyree. They both have their hands raised. You're muted, Co-Chair Blair.
We'll go from left to right. I see Keith Towery, then Justin Leaney and Brian Alcorn. I don't see any other hands in that order.
Thank you for the recognition. Chairwoman Blair, and I really appreciate this dialogue and conversation we're having. I know that some people are probably saying, oh, people are just using the word unity for buzz, right? I do want to just point out, when we use language and when we are talking about our respective communities, Ward 7, prior to the redistricting, we are very happy and excited to inherit our new neighbors, and we continue to welcome our new neighbors that are west of the river. And I want to make that very clear. We are so happy that you're a part of Ward 7. I think when we're talking about unity, we want to just make sure that we can all appreciate and understand that we have the same struggles. East of the river, Ward 7 has the same struggle when it comes to transportation issues. I think that was Commissioner Chandler that talked about Reservation 13. There are so many leaders in Ward 7 that fought very hard to make sure things in that particular place, which is Ward 7 initially, property, including RFK, was developed the way that the community best saw fit, right? So Ward 7 east of the river has been excellent when it comes to advocacy, excellent in getting these things done that we need. We have a great council member that listens to our concerns. We meet, we talk about issues, and we get things done. So I don't think that issues are just so much different from west of the river to east of the river. In fact, I think that both sides could benefit substantially from working together in order to get a lot of the problems that we're seeing in our individual communities. Marshall Heights is probably no different than things that happen in Rosedale, or Barney Circle, or Hill East, It will serve us all well for us to be united together so that other wards won't even try to play the card to try to divide us between East versus West. We have to be strong together because we are now a large Ward 7 family. And I do want to thank everybody again for the time for me to speak.
I think next up was Task Force Member Laney.
A couple thoughts. One, I was involved with 7D for a couple terms, and before then I was active in the community and observed how 7D functioned, and been a little less engaged the last year or two because of work reasons. But yeah, I would say that Commissioner Blair's concerns shouldn't be minimalized. I've seen 3 commissioners represent that single member district, and all have struggled with that. One particular issue I can think of that came up towards the end of my time as a commissioner was the Kingman Park Historic District. That was an issue that was very much in depth, required a lot of attention and time, and it was very difficult to provide it with that time, given that we also had our other issues to deal with, and which were significantly different, to be honest. I would also ask the commission or the task force, sorry, old habits. I would also ask the task force how integrating these single member districts into existing ANCs would look. We heard pretty strongly from Dean Wood in our first listening session that splitting a community between 2 ANCs would impose some difficulty in organizing that community. Would we be talking about splitting this between 3 different ANCs, 2 different ANCs? And how would that impact that community? I'm not sure that would be something that would create a lot of goodwill. And if we want unity, I think that is something we have to be very cognizant of. That's all I've got to say in the matter.
Thank you, sir. The next hand, I think we're moving on to Commissioner Alcorn.
Thank you, Commissioner Blair. I just wanted to ask, since we're a little over the hour mark, sort of on the first portion of this discussion, and since the discussion certainly has bled into the disposition of the 6A and 6B, as well as how the sort of east end of Capitol Hill would be realigned, if we could move on to the second part of the discussion, as some questions that have been asked may be answered by either that portion, or we could certainly continue in course after we have that opportunity for the presentation.
Commissioner Alcorn, I think what we need to do, did I see, if Commissioner Swanson, if you wouldn't mind putting your question in the chat, but we've already given a lot of time to 7D, so we want to be fair and move on to 6A. We will jump back and address your question when we get to another segment of questions. So Commissioner Alcorn, it's your time here.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Blair. Thank you, co-chairs. Thank you, Ms. Bunn, and thank you, members of the task force. My name is Brian Alcorn. I am a task force commission member. I'm a proud Ward 7 resident, and I'm also present commissioner for ANC 6A08, single member district. Tonight, I'm working with my colleague and fellow neighbor, Francis Campbell, who represents the equities of ANC 6B in the redistricting. And our approach this evening, I will present some information that I think will be helpful to the task force members about our joint communities. It's no secret that ANC 6A and 6B have worked together on many different issues, as we share a common geography, common neighborhood, and common concerns. So we are happy to proceed in this manner. I do have a PowerPoint presentation that I'll share, and hopefully I can project without having my computer crash, as it often does. So if once I click over, if there's any fatal errors, my voice comes through cracked or whatever, if somebody could just signal, I would appreciate that. So stand by. All right, can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Bear with me for one more moment. My computer most inopportunely places all of the animation controls in the same place. Okay. All right, so tonight I'm going to describe the ANC 6A and 6B Ward 7 elements as I describe sort of the Capitol Hill East End community. First, I think it is helpful to point out the role, how the boundaries have changed in the 2020 census. The redrawn boundaries moved the Ward 7 boundary from east to west. I would show that Ward 7 prior to this redistricting certainly did have a presence on the east end of Capitol Hill, and the 2020 census has moved that boundary westward to 15th Street, as it is illustrated in the second illustration, where the blue line is moving to the left. Now, what are the changes for ANC 6A and 6B residents who have been transitioned from Ward 6 to Ward 7? Well, we have approximately 9,439 residents that made this move. If you take a quick look at the map, you will see that ANC 6A is outlined in blue along sort of the top of the map here. And the portion of ANC 6A that has moved to Ward 7 is illustrated by the hard black line and the series of dots to the left of that line. Similarly, for ANC 6B, you can appreciate the wide geography that ANC 6B covered in the southwest of the district. And then again, the portion that has been redistricted toward 7 is shown to the right of the black line and the green dots. So collectively, the green dotted area, north and south, we are now Ward 7 residents, and these are the portions of ANC 6A and 6B that have been moved toward 7. From the community's perspective, which I think is important, roughly 1/3 of ANC 6A's current geography moved toward 7. That represents about 2.5 of our single member districts and 5,329 residents. And roughly 1/6 of ANC 6B's current geography moved toward 7, which is about 1.25 single member districts and about 4,104 residents. I think it's also important to point out that Ward 7 is now a large presence on Capitol Hill, which is to say, the DC Office of Planning defines the Capitol Hill element as a community of Capitol Hill. It goes on to say that in many respects, Capitol Hill is a city within a city. The community has well-defined physical boundaries that enhance its sense of identity. And with the 2020 census, ward redistricting, Ward 7, which is the burgundy outline on this map, covers a sizable part of Capitol Hill. Or put another way, Ward 7 occupies the east end of Capitol Hill, according to the area element. Now let's take a slightly deeper dive into what the geography of the ANC 6A and 6B Ward 7 portions are. Our neighborhood is characterized by low-rise residential buildings, 2 to 3 stories. We have an overwhelming RF1 zoning area, which means that the area is predominantly developed with attached row houses on small lots. And our housing stock is primarily 1890s to 1940s. The green shaded area is between 2 historic districts that have been set down by HPRB. Our residents rely on extensive on-street parking due to these small lots. I would point out that we have an identical built environment, which are row houses on both sides of 15th Street, which is now the new Ward 6 and 7 boundary line. And we have a very similar built environment in Kingman Park, 7D01, just like we have a similar built environment in Lincoln Park to the west. The streets that define our small geography, 15th Street is considered a 1-lane collector street, which is 1 step up from a local street. Potomac Avenue is also considered a collector street. 19th Street is a minor arterial, and Benning Road to the north is a principal arterial. Benning Road also divides Ward 7 and Ward 5. We have limited commercial activity, which is to say that there are small corner stores, but no shopping centers or commercial grocery stores in our neighborhood. And we do have some takeout restaurants and some liquor stores. Overall, I think it's fair to say that there's very limited commercial or residential development opportunities due to the very heavily built environment and the zoning. And Ward 5, as I pointed out, is north of Benning Road. I think it's also important to note the DC government's presence in our community. To the north, Rosedale Library, the Rosedale Rec Center, and the Rosedale Outdoor Pool are present. Nearby is also Minor Elementary School. To the south, Elliott Hine Junior High and Eastern Senior High, known as the Pride of Capitol Hill, anchors the center portion of the geography. These were all portions that came over to Ward 7. We did talk about MPD district coverage and some of the confounding lines that Commissioner Blair has had to deal with. Our community as well is bisected by the unusual boundaries of the MPD 1st District and 5th District. I point this out because there are real considerations that do happen from this line that extends along C Street and then northward up 15th Street. If you're on the north side and you call for emergency services, you receive a different police response, or rather a different police district response than if you're on the south side and call for emergency assistance. And this also leads to difficulties in jurisdictional questions as it relates to crime that crosses the borders. This is a challenge that we've learned to mitigate and learned to work with. However, it is not a simple matter and requires much coordination, including at least having 2 police districts attend your ANC meetings or be involved with ANCs, and also fielding ANC members to monitor those things. So additional time and effort on the ANC. And then what I've been reflecting on, and certainly what I've been receiving community input on, is, well, what does the ANC areas covered by 6A and 6B need for the ANC to effectively serve the 9,439 residents who are now in this unknown but soon to be constructed ANC structure, whatever it is. I would say that the ANC will need to actively engage in planning and zoning issues. There's absolutely a regular tempo of residents who need ANC assistance in our communities with the Board of Zoning Adjustment and the Zoning Commission. This is because Capitol Hill's RF1 zoning requirements are exacting, difficult, and it's very time-consuming to navigate through these issues. We also need an ANC that plans to actively engage on transportation and road safety issues, which is not uncommon to other ANCs across the city. But our localized concerns is that the community is bisected by commuter routes and heavy traffic that causes unsafe situations for residents. And we certainly have a constant dialogue and engagement and continuous request for continuous improvement that residents demand from our commissioners. We look to our ANC to deliver results on creating additional bicycle infrastructure to serve the community, including protected cycle tracks. We seek to have highly engaged ANC commissioners and extensive community outreach capabilities. Our community demands a lot from our ANC commissioners because arguably we don't have any neighborhood association structures or those that are not particularly active at this time. We seek to have accessible meetings for community members so that they can reasonably walk to these meetings. And for seniors and certainly those residents who don't have cars, that's important as we return to some normalcy post-COVID. And lastly, we want to make sure that the ANC structure that we become a part of ensures that the goals of the redistricting are met, which is to say that it is to keep the ANCs and single member districts compact and contiguous, that they conform as close as possible to census tracts, that they keep single member districts between 1,900 and 21 citizens as possible, that they follow natural geography, and that they keep communities of interest together. Last, I would say, what are the possibilities for us? And this is a question that many community members have been asking me, and I'm sure will ask after this presentation. It's indisputable that Ward 7 now occupies a good portion of the Capitol Hill element, and in effect, it is the whole east end of Capitol Hill to the boundary of the Anacostia River. Now, our communities that will be served by the new ANC, whatever form it takes, also need to be continued to be connected to our neighbors to the west. Excuse me, which is on the west side of 15th Street, which is the new Ward 6 and 7 dividing line. This is one person's opinion, but it seems appropriate to look to form an ANC that will cover residents of the east end of Capitol Hill. The needs are localized, the geography is compact, and the population seems to support that. And when I say population seems to support that, I mean the population numbers. According to the mapping tool, there are 13,681 residents in the east end part of Capitol Hill, that is Ward 7. If you divide that by 1,900, which is the lowest number of commissioners that would be the lowest number of residents that would be expected in a single member district, that brings you to about 7, which means you could form about 7 single member districts with that population. And last, I would say that in my listening sessions, other residents have suggested that a cross-ward ANC 6-7 structure might serve community needs, including Mr. Chandler J. Rahman. Thank you for that suggestion. We acknowledge that we have heard these observations, and it may be hard to negotiate, especially if we have a viable option in just for one ward. But that's enough for me. Let me now hand it over to Mr. Campbell, who has some additional information to share. Francis, you're up.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Let me see if I can pull up a map that I wanted to. Let me see.
Mr. Campbell, if I can assist you with any maps, I may have the technical ability, although I can't guarantee it.
I'm trying to see if I can show you this one, which is the present S&D boundaries as they show up. I might have sent this to you, Brian, that shows the existing 6B, 6A, 7D map. Do you have that?
Bear with me.
So,
Excuse me. My mom went and took a break.
Mr. Campbell, is this a helpful map?
Let me see. Hold up, if you don't mind, please. I couldn't get mine to open. Have you been able to open it, Brian?
We're presently displaying a map of the current boundaries of ANC 6A and B.
I'm only seeing the folder.
I'm only seeing the folder. I don't see the map.
I'm sorry.
Well, I can speak while he's doing that. At one point, I'm a former commissioner for 6B10 from 2002 to 2014. And for 6 terms, I chaired planning and zoning my entire tenure. And speaking of Reservation 13, it was in my S&D up until the 2010 redistricting. When St. Cletus was built down there, I was a commissioner that reached out to, as a matter of fact, I worked at DC General, actually in the NICU and SICUs for a number of years. But presently and I'm retired now presently, but what we have proposed, or what I have proposed, and you see on this isn't the one, Brian. I'm looking at this. Why don't you pull up the the proposed map, and I can explain that, because I think I may be able to answer a number of questions that people were asking about the rest of the river ANCs.
Shall we start with the early iteration or one of the newer iterations?
Start with the early iteration.
All right. And thank you for your indulgence, committee members.
Okay. Okay. This is if you'll look at this, well, if you can see this, I don't know if you can blow it a little bit more. This was an earlier iteration, an earlier proposal I had. I've been knocking around. There is sufficient population on this side of the river. Roughly, when I looked at the 2020 census, I did a block by block analysis of that and added up the total population that came up with roughly, without the 2,386 members of the jail population, that there were roughly 14,521 bodies or population in the area. And that included the Kingman Park area, which I believe is 7D right now, and the Reservation 13 area, which is just the jail population. Now, historically, the jail population was 6B11, a non-voting SMD in 6B. There were 11 SMDs in 6B. And in every meeting, there were only 10 commissioners, which was 6B01 through 6B10. The jail, like I said, was 6B11. And it wasn't until Mr. Gaston was elected that there was a voting representation in that area. So again, what I propose to do is, because in the present, in the numbers that Brian and I have been trying to get from OP have talked about group quarters and what comprises that, which is basically the jail, the Tubman shelter, are regarded as group quarters. There's also CSOSA, which is on that property. The Ethel, which is the building that's going up now, and the Park Kennedy were not included in the 2020 census. So apparently what they were saying was that area that comprised the jail, the Tubman shelter, and possibly CSOSA was roughly 2,386 people, okay, which is well over the 2,100 that typically would be an SMD, but obviously we have no control over that. So which is why I propose that the jail would be a separate SMD. Additionally, that there is sufficient adequate population to create SMDs roughly around 2,000 members. Brian, if you can bring up the latest map that I proposed. Speaking of which, I also drew up street boundaries and to give people the exact numbers of those now. And the new proposal that I was putting together, the only SMD that actually came to 2,100 was what I proposed as 7, and I proposed this whole area as 7A, was 7A04, which is 2,100 people. So the areas, and then as I'm looking through it, and if Brian, when he is able to pull up the latest iteration of the map, shows, like I said, in populations of roughly 2,000, between 2,000, just over 2,050, between 2,100. It does annex that area that was 7D as well as 7F, that was Reservation 13. Now, if I carved out the jail population, that would bring the boundary down Massachusetts Avenue to roughly the service road that runs behind the jail along the border of Congressional Cemetery and back down to the East Street area and back up 19th Street. The adjacent area of Reservation 13 will move from what I propose to be the new 7A03. So when he's, and I know I'm talking in the blind now, but if he's able to pull this map up, he'll be able to see what it is I propose. The other reason of this is that on the mapping tool, it will not allow you to separate any area of Reservation 13. So that area, and I have to thank Commissioner Lynn for this, because it will not allow you to separate any of the areas. So those maps have to be hand drawn. Okay, so if you look down here, I also tried to write out the streets so that people would be able to see them. This is the latest iteration of the map that I've been working on today. The 7A01 map, and all 7A01, 7A04, 5, and 7 all border 15th Street. 7A06 and 7 run along Benning Road, and 07 and 03, which would encompass and take up the other area of Reservation 13, would both run to the river, which is a natural boundary. So, as you can see, 7A01 has a population of 2,077, 03, 2,073, 04, 2,100, 05, 2,077, 06, 2,037, and 07, 2,084. So to speak to Commissioner Blair's concern, it is a contiguous area, and it allows for 7 SMDs to be created in a standalone ANC. All right. I'm open to, as I've put out to the residents, and then and again, this map, again, I cannot save in such a manner that you can see it in the mapping tool, because again, it does not allow you to save because you cannot divide reservation 13 and it doesn't fit the criteria on the save tool that allows you to do so. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, like I said, the issues that I see are ones that, as Brian has talked about, this is a area that some of the issues are unique in that the row housing, historic districts, and the transportation issues that we face, and not to say that there aren't issues similar to that on the other side of the river. But again, I'm presently on the Planning and Zoning Committee for reservation for 6B. And when we start talking about zoning issues, it has been one in which residents don't see lines on a map or draw differences in the community. They have to come to the commissioners and they're asking questions that are going to center around what can I build, how can I build, taking into consideration where the zonings are, where the lines are drawn for HPRB and CHRS, Historic Preservation and Capitol Hill Restoration Society. So those issues sometimes tie into areas when at one point people wanted to have a historic district in the Bonnie Circle area. And that would have taken place at one time had not the population change, had it not sat in abeyance for a while until the residents had changed in such a manner that the new residents. So there are issues that make, despite what people talk about continuity, there are issues that are indigenous just to the area that I think are best addressed by those. I mean, I would not deign to try to reach across the river and draw out lines and demarcate where S&D should or should not be, because I'm very familiar with this neighborhood and what it is I have done for the last 20 years. The same with Reservation 13. When we initially, when the hospital closed initially, and we were working hard on setting down the zoning and setting down what would take place in the master plan of that area. You know, so again, like I said, I'm more than willing to answer any questions related to this. I hope that explains it, because you ask people asking for maps. And again, like I said, this is what I see as a large enough, sufficient population.
Mr. Campbell, could I have a minute just to talk about the DC jail?
Sure.
Great. So I'd like to take a swing at this as well. I think that you explained it quite eloquently, but just wanted to share some of my learnings. So in collaborating with you and certainly working on trying to use the mapping tool, as Mr. Campbell has referenced, we did come upon the quirk that the present geography, which is known in ANC parlance as 7F07, which is known in census parlance as Census Block 68.04-1013, and that block having been assessed as having 2,386 population in the 2020 census. We recognize that the mapping tool does not allow us to further divide that census block. And that's a problem for two reasons. Number one, as Mr. Campbell said, because 2386 is greater than 2100, which is the upper limit of what you would look for population-wise to support a single member district seat. But we have the unique circumstance too of having the DC jail co-located on a parcel with other properties where residents have a higher level of mobility, which is to say that the District of Columbia and council members, including Councilmember Gray, made the extraordinary effort to ensure that an ANC representative could be seated to represent the DC jail. It is our contention that the DC jail has its own unique interests, circumstances, and information that can be presented to the community in the form of an ANC commissioner. but there is a remaining geography that is currently sort of locked up in that census block that includes the Tubman shelter, that includes the Park Kennedy, although for the 2020 census purposes, the Park Kennedy will have a population of 0, as well as the CSOSA Carrick Hall activity, which is a residential facility, that there are other members of our citizenry who are not living in the DC jail who may sort of benefit from having connectivity to another ANC single member district. So the thought here is, and this is why this is a hand-drawn map, that there is sort of a benefit to stand up a dedicated, or rather to reinforce a dedicated ANC representation for the DC jail, and then to ensure that other residents, as they begin to populate an area that is currently under development, have sort of requisite representation. This is also a concept that we would, I think, certainly be interested in hearing from Task Force Co-Chair, Mr. Castone, given that he would have some expertise in this area. So with that, I will be quiet and look forward to any questions, observations, or what the community may have to offer.
I may just want to add in that you're looking at this and you're seeing the C Street 7802 number. That 7802 is the jail, and the line drawn down there is the Massachusetts Avenue extension. So that area where you see 7803, it would encompass everything north of that line up until where it says Independence Avenue. So that the orange area adjacent to that, I could not color because of the mapping tools. So that would be the area that would be that would also go into 7803, with the idea of being able to better represent the new residents as they come about in the Reservation 13 area. And I'm done at this point. Open for any other questions.
Co-chairs Blair and Castone, and task force members Alcorn and Mr. Campbell. There are 3 hands raised from the community, as well as one of your task force members. 2 of your task force members have questions. So let me know how you all want to proceed.
We want to hear from our community before we venture into questions amongst the task force. That's been what we've been trying to do for all our sessions, is to hear from the public before we hear from the task force.
Ms. Blair, if you would go ahead, and I will defer to your expertise in picking who you'd like to ask first.
Okay, so let me, in terms of who I saw hands raised first, give me a second. All right.
I'm sorry.
So, it's okay. First in the lineup, we have Commissioner Denise Krepp. Commissioner Krepp, you should be able to speak.
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So hi, my name is Denise, and I have been the ANC Commissioner for 6B10 for about, I'm going on my 8th year, and I had the honor and the privilege of following the steps of Francis Campbell, who has been a great friend and mentor. And one of the things Francis quickly told me, he said, look, you're going to have to work with ANC 6B09. And then he said, you're going to have to work with the folks above. And I said, why, Francis? He goes, well, because we got some issues on 17th and 19th Streets. So when you look at traffic patterns, we have people flowing out of the city on 19th and in on 17th. And that's why I've become really good friends with those 2 commissioners, because those are the folks that I call on transportation. I don't call commissioners on the other side of the river because, well, you guys don't have 19th and you don't have 17th, but 17th and 19th stretch. So that's an example of how we've had to work together. In this past year, Brian and I have had to work together closely because of the DC Armory. You know, we had an insurrection. Then we had 20,000 National Guard troops that literally showed up a half a block from my house. And the first call I got from Brian was, hey, Denise, what are we going to do with all these buses? So what happened was when all of the folks showed up, all the National Guard troops showed up to protect the city, they put buses down 19th Street and they were sitting and they were idling. Again, I didn't call the other side of the river. I called the guy just north of me because, well, that's what I have. We had idling buses. We had guns literally pointed down A Street. And that was, you know, when people talk about unique, that was probably as unique as I've ever seen in the past 8 years. And again, it's because of the way in which this area is situated. So we've been, you know, working on that. We've had a very close relationship dealing with Reservation 13. I mean, I know most of you because I hosted those meetings. I hosted 6 years worth of meetings on Reservation 13. And the reason I hosted them was because my neighbors, along with those living at 6B09, were the ones across the street. There was nobody there. So we had to do that. That's why, you know, tying us to Reservation 13 is very important, because those roads are extending east-west as well as north-south into 6B09 and 6B10. That's, again, important because that's the way in which we are situated. And we are situated in this way because of the roads in which we have. And that's why I'm grateful for Brian and for Francis for developing this map, because it meets the needs of the residents who live here. And that's why you're here tonight. And that's why you're going to hear from a lot of my residents. They want to be part of Ward 7. They're very excited to be part of Ward 7, but they need an ANC that reflects this part of the neighborhood. And the map that Francis and Brian have drawn reflect what our neighbors need. And they need it because of the roads, they need it because of the infrastructure, and they need it because of the proximity that we have for other things. So I just say thank you to Brian and Francis for drawing this map. And if folks have any questions for me about the examples I've given you about, you know, what I've seen over the past 8 years, I'm happy to answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Krepp. I myself have worked with Commissioner Krepp on issues relative to RFK campus. I sat with her in the director's office for DPW to go over some issues. So, and then most recently, I've attended meetings, a meeting in reference to 19th Street bike infrastructure. So we have an existing relationship with SMDs on this side that have issues relative to this side that don't impact and probably would not interest anyone other than the communities in this compact area.
Next up, we have, and please forgive me if I mispronounce, Taika Tong Mason. You have the floor. You need to unmute if you're speaking. Okay, I'm going to keep you in the lineup, but go to the next person. Next up, we have Gladys Mack. Miss Mack, you have the floor.
Unmute. Hello. I'd like to thank Alcorn and Francis for getting ahead on these maps and moving us forward. And I do support what Alcorn put out there, and it looks good.
Thank you. Moving on to our next speaker, we have Laura Forsythe. You have the floor.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Thank you so much. My name is Laura Forsythe. I'm a resident of 6B06, but I'm here speaking on behalf of Neighbors for Justice, which is an organization of many local neighbors that formed in 2020, and we're striving to be good neighbors to our neighbors who reside in the DC jail. And some of my colleagues may also be on the line as well, but they, I know, had some other meetings to go to as well. But really just wanted to be here to advocate for the residents of the jail having their own SMD, as the gentleman spoke to earlier, really because it's such a unique opportunity for representation and voice. And we think that that wouldn't be reflected as they would if they are combined with other residents who, as it was mentioned, have just different types of mobility and ability to participate in the process and in the elections and have other neighborhood issues. So we just wanted to put our strong support behind the jail the jail being an SMD.
If I could for a moment, I would like to sort of thank Ms. Forsythe for that perspective and add in again the unique situation about the census tract. I think that our neighbors also do need to consider that these boundaries that we are establishing are boundaries that are going to endure for 10 years. And within the scope of 10 years, that will be 5 ANC election cycles. So while presently the disposition of residency on this unified parcel, shared with the DC jail, there are not too many residents in areas that are to be developed in the next 10 years. Perhaps by the second or the third cycle where we elect a single member district for that area, the number of voters and the number of candidates shared with the jail might outpace the jail candidates. So again, by design, I would say that having the DC jail with its own single member district, given the unique attributes there, and given the unfortunate limitations presently of the mapping software, can be reconciled by this concept.
All right, I'm going to go back to Taika Tong Mason. Okay, give me one second. You have the floor. I think I just muted you by mistake, so you need to unmute. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was trying to cook and multitask at the same time and listen to this very hearty conversation, but I had placed a couple of questions in the chat already, and Keith and I were having a very hearty discussion. There are some concerns that I have, like about the redistricting, because I'm noticing that in some areas like Ward 5, where the schools were public, there are certain schools that were public, and then now that they've redistricted to Ward 6 or opened it up to students all over the ward, now the populations are changing in those neighborhoods of those schools. And so my question is that when we redistrict the neighborhood, does that mean that the school addresses are going to change their addresses and their zip codes so that now that students from out of boundary can go to those schools? Because we are seeing years of Ward 7 and Ward 8 students under still not making AYP. And I'm a teacher in PG County, and my children did go to schools in Ward 6 and Ward 7. So I do have some experience on that, even though I live on this side now. I see that there's a problem that's going on with our area. So I just wanted to know what will be the perks, the advantages and the disadvantages of the redistricting when it comes to the schools in our area, because there is, as we all know, there is a problem, because a lot of people want their children to go to school uptown because of the way that our schools are in our own neighborhood. And so, it's just really a problem. And then my second part was regarding the retail. I have been a part of the Parkside Retail Board and Civic Association with Artilly and Justin and others for many, many years since I've been here in the Ward 7 area. And as I was trying to explain to Keith in the chat that it came out of the mouth of these executives who are saying that our neighborhoods are not worthy of them investing good retail stores in our neighborhoods. And as we already know, the Safeway is a problem. A lot of people in our neighborhoods go to Maryland, go to Virginia, go to other wards in order to go shopping because we don't have anything that's healthy, that's worthy of us spending our money in our own neighborhoods. And we want to be able to have that. So what do we need to do to make those things better, especially because now the redistricting is affecting a lot of people. And we know that people who live in those wards that now have to be in a different ward that they never wanted to live in, that they never wanted to recognize, now they have to be a part of it. And they are squawking about it because I see it all over neighbor next door. So I just wanted to know about those two questions, the redistricting of the schools and how will that make it better for the students and the children who live in the neighborhood so that they won't have to travel so far to go to better schools that make AYP, and about the retail, because we desperately need quality retail in our neighborhoods and not just housing and apartments and all those things. We need all of it. We need all of it. And I appreciate you guys hearing what I have to say, voicing it instead of putting in the chat. So if anyone could answer that, since Keith and I've already had a healthy discussion, maybe someone else can. Maybe there's a point that I missed, but I know what I heard in those meetings as being there as an almost 8-year member of the Parkside Retail Board, that we're still having issues of having good retailers wanting to come to our neighborhood, even though we live off of 295 and that we have so much traction going up and down the highway that we will be able to pull the numbers so that we can have the money coming into our neighborhood so that we can get what we need, because we've been locked out for such a long time. So if someone could, pose some more information to that to make me better understand, I would really highly appreciate that. Thank you.
I can take a crack at the schools. As I did mention, in this redistricting, there were 3 DC public schools that were, through the ward redistricting, moved from Ward 6 to Ward 7. That is Eastern High School, Elliott Hine Junior High, and Minor Elementary School, all of which are in the northeast quadrant. We have been told by others when this question was raised that redistricting has no impact on those schools, in the sense that the feeder patterns that attach to neighborhoods, if your child is attending an elementary school, there's a geographic feeder pattern that would then determine which middle school and then which high school they would go to. Those feeder patterns have not changed in redistricting. Those were established, I believe, in 2014 when the DCPS task force sort of took care of those issues. So as it relates to schools and as it relates to this particular geography, the only thing that's changing with those 3 institutions is that they've been moved administratively from Ward 6 to Ward 7, which means the school board representative, the state Board of Education representative that is nominally responsible for those schools is no longer the Ward 7 rep. It is now it's no longer the Ward 6 rep. It's the Ward 7 rep. But also in redistricting, we were told that both council members, Allen, as well as Councilmember Gray, are great supporters of the school, these institutions specifically, and that they will have their full support, as I also assume both the Ward 6 and the Ward 7 Board of Education members will have as well. I can't offer any comment on retail other than, for this particular geography, there's sort of no retail opportunities since this is a largely residential neighborhood.
Thank you, Commissioner Alcorn, for responding regarding the school. And retail, yes, it's a much needed thing within Ward 7, but it doesn't factor into what we are charged with as far as drawing boundaries for SMDs and ANCs. And okay, somebody had an open mic. I think they found that. But it is, and just briefly, retail is something that is near and dear to all of our hearts, and it's still going to continue to be a topic of a discussion outside of redistricting. That's not going to go away. We'll keep pressing for more retail and new development across Ward 7. Any other?
Yes, Commissioner Co-Chair Blair. Yes, we have 2 more hands from the community. Commissioner Sandra Phillips Gilbert, you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Sandra Gilbert, current chair ANC for 6A07 and a proud Ward 7 member, community member. I just want to give great support and appreciation for Brian Alcorn's presentation and for the hard work that Francis Campbell did on this map and keeping the communities together. The most important thing now is the redistricting is to build on making Ward 7 a stronger ward. And by keeping existing communities intact and building on those concerns, we can work and continue our service to community members. And so support the presentation, and I will do what I can to present this to City Council or whomever to make sure that we are a strong commission that can focus on the concerns of the new members of Ward 7. It's very important now. We're dealing with a lot of crime and needed community services. And I would hate to see us splintered and not focused on the present community that we're in. And being across the river, I think that we should remain intact and cohesive so that we can continue to focus on the existing concerns. And that's it. I just want everyone to know that I really appreciate all the hard work and effort everyone has put into this. And thank you, Brian and Francis.
Thank you. Do we have another hand or question in the chat?
Ma'am, we do. Hold on, we have one more. Give me 1 second. We have Bren Barnett again. Ms. Barnett, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Sheila. I appreciate that. And thank you again to everyone for convening this tonight. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to weigh in. I did so very much during the entire redistricting process. So I certainly am glad to keep it going as we drill down into our local neighborhood. I do also want to thank Brian and Francis. It's very important that we respect natural, geographic, and community contiguous boundaries. You know, Sandra said it very well, and it's just really rare that SMD issues would spread that much further And you know, I do also fear that our ANCs would then lose focus on what's most important to each individual community. And you know, that goes not just for advocating for this, you know, contiguous west of the river ANC, but also east of the river. You know, I think that as much as we can make things compact and contiguous, that was my argument throughout redistricting. Yeah, that's better for everyone. I do also want to express my support for exploring the idea of a joint 6-7 ANC. You know, just because boundaries have been redrawn, our neighbors maintain, you know, day-to-day concerns about their community issues that are adjacent to the SMDs, and you know, within blocks, not just across not so much across a geographic boundary such as the river. So, you know, I look forward to seeing additional ideas for maps, both for Ward 7 and a combination Ward 6 and 7. I know that I asked the question about reasons other than unity, and I hope that didn't convey that I don't support unity, because I think I said that I do, but I just wanted to underscore that. You know, I very much support unity among all who comprise Ward 7. I'm just being more realistic regarding the lines that we're drawing for the SMDs and the ANCs. And then I read something in the chat that really upset me, and I want to voice it to everyone, because I feel like it goes against the idea of unity. And it said in the chat that people tried to use property values as a reason not to join Ward 7. And I participated in almost every forum, hearing. I even joined the Ward 7 hearing that was on Facebook and made some comments and asked some questions in that chat. And I never once did I ever hear that. And that it should be said that that's a narrative that was used as a reason. I wrote an op-ed in the Hill Rag, and everything was about keeping communities together. That is the bottom line for me, and it is the bottom line for all of my neighbors. So, you know, we are more than happy to be partnered to, you know, to join Ward 7 and and be part of the whole Ward 7 community. But when we're talking about these lines, it's just so important to focus on community and the community needs. And I just really encourage the entire task force to remember that as you move forward. And I'm happy to have a further conversation with the poster about that. And I'm also happy to answer any questions. And again, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you for that input. Who else is still in the chat?
Chair Blair, I don't know about the chat, because the chat, there's so much commentary going back and forth.
Yeah.
I don't see questions, but I do see 4 of your task force members have their hands raised. I don't think I see questions in the chat. More folks are having discussions, and we'll save the chat for you. But I do see 4 of your task force members have their hands raised.
Okay, if there are no other public attendees, we can hear from some task force.
I'm sorry, Chair Blair, and forgive me, I missed one hand.
Okay.
Commissioner Allison Horn has her hand raised, but after that, that's it. I don't see anybody else. So let me give her the ability to speak. Commissioner Horn, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for convening this meeting. Thanks to the co-chairs of the task force for the thorough job that you all are doing to make sure that you're listening to various stakeholders. I'm currently the ANC commissioner in 6B09. On the map that's here on the screen, the portion of my single member district that was redistricted towards 7 is labeled 7A01. It's kind of purple in the bottom left corner. I've also been a fairly active participant in some of the redistricting discussions at the ward level. I think I was the only ANC commissioner from the portion of Ward 6 that was redistricted to 7 that at that stage was expressing any openness to being redistricted to Ward 7. And I've been really grateful, in the spirit of unity, I've been really grateful to the Ward 7 neighbors and leaders who have reached out since the redistricting happened to sort of welcome me and my residents to their new ward. Just wanted to give voice to some of the issues that are being that have been raised by some of my residents as we think about this new phase of redistricting. And in particular, I think we need to pay attention to what sort of the core functions of ANCs are, right? And so I think some of the, I'm supportive of this map. I, would be interested in hearing, I think sort of the core concerns are we want to make sure that neighbors are able to have a voice in what's going on around them, right? So while we certainly share concerns about, we all care about traffic safety, we all care about having sort of safe communities, having affordable housing and all of those types of things. There's sort of a unique care about, the park right in my neighborhood and the street that, my neighbors walk on to, crosswalks that they walk on to take their kids to school and whatnot. And so want to make sure that if there are issues that are sort of hyper local to, my neighborhood and my neighbors, that they're able to get items related to those issues on the agenda of their ANC meeting. So I wanted to make sure to kind of give voice to that. And, I am supportive and I think it would be helpful for coordination of some of the DDOT projects that we have going on 17th Street and 19th Street. And some of the ongoing development in our area, where a lot of my neighbors have been sort of looking across the street at Reservation 13 going up, but really haven't had any vote or any say on what's going on there. And I think that really needs to change. So, with that being said, I'm very supportive of unity and want to make sure that myself, along with the former Ward 6 residents who are now residents of Ward 7, are able to have opportunities to be united with the rest of our Ward 7 neighbors. But I think that needs to not happen at the expense of having a real meaningful vote and say in the things that are going on around us. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Horn, for contributing those comments. Happy to have you in Ward 7. I've worked with Commissioner Horn on a district where cross-city cleanup we did a few months ago. We ended up in River Terrace together. Who's next? I see some more hands.
Those are your task force members. There are no more.
Okay. No more public. Okay.
No, ma'am.
We're gonna go from right to left. Let's go with task force member Mandla Deskins.
When you paused, I was like, she's trying to pronounce that name.
Did I get it right? Did I get it right?
You did well. No worries. You did well. I wanted to take a moment. This has been really informative to me, both from members of the task force as well as other folks and that are participating, larger numbers of attendees. As we think about these, I just wanted to, share a bit of perspective from my side, because I hear a lot of, a community, what is a community? And, I think that one of the great things about this process in Ward 7 extending more across the river is that, we have the ability to better connect Ward 7 with the other communities that are now Ward 7, right? We have, I'm thinking about how we would love to have more use to the fields, but we don't have any access across the East Capitol Bridge. And though my neighbors, some members of my civic association advocated really strongly for there to be, access across the bridge for people who lived right across the bridge on the other side, that access was not right, created sufficiently. So I understand folks saying like we have very particular issues that are different, but we also have a lot that are related. I mean, East Capitol is the thoroughfare that people from Maryland use to get into the city. That's a big area that we all connect on. And so like, I just want us to not get caught in this space where we're like, well, this is our neighborhood and we have our own issues, so we should have our own commission, ignoring the fact that there is a lot that brings us together. And there's a lot that we should be bringing together as we think about our communities. Whatever is going to happen with RFK in the future, we should make sure that people who live across the river are not continued, our isolation is not continued as it has been in the past, just because, we are Black people and we live east of the river. And so that's just something to just note. Like, we should also consider, how do we collaborate to make sure that we don't exacerbate the disparities that we've already seen, because we extended on the other side and now we officially have Ward 7 ANC. But how is that connected to what's already happened on the other side of the river? So anyway, that was just my little bit of jumbled comments that I was just trying to put together. That was all I had to say.
Comments, let's see, who's next? Commissioner Leaning, is your hand up a new hand or is that an old hand?
It's a new hand, but I believe there are others who've had their hands up much longer than me.
Well, I was just going from right to left, and you're next to Mr. Deskin, so that's how I got to you.
Okay. I will be really short, and actually I wanted to respond to something Mandela brought up just now about working across boundaries. I recall I was looking through some of our previous messaging or previous instructions, and aren't one of the tasks that we have been assigned to comment on the functioning of ANCs? Because I'm getting a lot of, I think what I'm hearing from a lot of people, my neighbors in 7F and 7C or 7E, is that we need to work across boundaries. And I know that's something that commissions do kind of in an ad hoc manner, but I'm wondering if that's not something we can sort of make recommendations on or propose solutions to as this task force. There's not really a mechanism to do it under current DC law, because I've looked into it, but I'm wondering if that's not something we could advocate for, to create more stronger cross commission compacts or opportunities for collaboration, because there's so many problems that like Mandela mentioned are just begging for that kind of approach.
Thank you, Commissioner Leaning. The next I see Keith Hassan Towery.
Hey, everybody. I guess my comments are just that, going back to that unity word again, I did enjoy seeing the different ideas that were presented for the 11 different SMDs for the west of the river consideration for ANC area. I do want to just emphasize again that I think that we can serve each other better and our communities better if we integrate our commission areas with what's on the east of the river and what's rest of the river. And there was also another comment that I did want to address about maybe somebody did not hear certain comments that were happening during the time when we were having a full redistricting conversations. I was very intimately involved in that process. Matter of fact, I think I was map 1 that was selected amongst the city. And one of the things that I thought about when I was designing the map across the city was ensuring that we can have communities that are integrated and unified. There were definitely a lot of disparaging comments that came from the former Ward 6 side of the house. And I really think one way that we can all build trust with one another is just to force ourselves to work together. And it should even be a forcing ourselves to work together. It's simply, let's work together. Let's get our issues solved together because we have similar issues and we can do it together. Thank you again for the time.
Ms. Blair, may I make a comment?
I'll come back to you after
okay.
Commissioner Swanson.
Thank you, Commissioner Blair. So I just wanted to quick comment on, since this has come up a lot in today's session, about the idea of having our ANCs straddle the river versus one on just the west side of the river. And I really feel like, for me, that I would really want to, before making any decisions about that, hear about this from the impacted people. I want to, like, how do people west of the river feel about having a ANC that straddles the river versus one that's just solely west of the river, as well as the people on the east side of the river who would be potentially shuffled into that. How do people in like Fairlawn, Twining, Greenway, River Terrace feel about having their straddle the river, knowing that that could potentially strengthen them or weaken them? I mean, we don't really know how that would play out. I will say, as a representative of ANC 7B on the task force, we have been hearing a lot, especially since our presentation a couple of weeks ago, which I was on flight, but I was able to watch streaming on YouTube. I just wasn't able to get in on Zoom to participate, but I was watching that hearing live. And I know I, as well as the other 7B representatives, Eric and Marla, have received a lot of feedback, particularly from residents of present day 7B01, which is represents Greenway. And that's potentially one of those areas that would be pulled to a west of the river commission if we were to have a commission that straddled the river. I'm assuming Minnesota Avenue would be a border, or a potential border, because it's kind of a natural boundary that runs the whole ward. And people in current 7B01 in Greenway are adamant that they want to stay in ANC 7B. So I think that this is, like, we have to think about the impact and hear from people not only west of the river, but also the people east of the river who would be impacted by a decision to have ANC straddle the river as well. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's not really a question, just kind of a thought that we really need to consider all of the options and all of the people who would be impacted by a solely west of the river commission versus a commission that straddles the river, or two commissions that straddle the river. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I'm going to go back to Commissioner Campbell.
I'm not going to take a minute. Mr. Towery, I believe it was, who mentioned the working. I'm going to speak to one thing, sir. I'm going to tell you this. When Reservation 13 was moved into Ward 7, initially, when this area where I live in was Ward 6, again, I personally, and a number of my residents, would reach out continuously to the commissioner who had control, I'll say, over Res 13. And this may be very pointed, is that we were told continuously, stay out of it. It's not your concern. Despite the number of years that I invested personally in working with this. And then when I spoke to DMPAD told me point blank, we did not take into consideration anything that you had to say or anything that your neighbors had to say. We listened solely to Ward 7. Now, speaking to what you're talking about, working in collaboration, that made it very difficult. I mean, I've put in more than 20 years of working in this. I know my neighbors throughout my neighborhood have worked continuously in trying to get something done here. And one of the things I will point out is that we live directly across the street. And so whatever happens here is going to directly impact us on a day-to-day basis. I'm not adverse to working collaboratively with anyone. I mean, we have done this through the years with 6A, with residents on 7 and King Park, and trying to work things out. But to be told, stay out of it, or as I was told, point blank, you've got nothing to say about this, so stay the hell out of it. I find it very difficult listening to what you're saying, and I'm still willing to work and try to get this done. But it again is going to impact us day to day. I mean, you can't say that it's going to impact those across the river, because there is a river, there's a freeway, and there's a railroad tracks. Okay, I'm not, again, like I said, talking about and make people understand. Reservation 13 is wholly different from the area that comprises RFK, because those are two different things, two different entities altogether. So Reservation 13 is solely that area that is south of Independence Avenue, okay, in the river. And there's also property that is owned by WASA, by the Petco, and by CSX, which is the railroad. You know, so there are a lot of entities that we have worked with over the years in trying to address the needs, the layout of those things. Okay, so I'm just putting that out there, just so that you are aware.
Thank you, sir, for those comments. The next hand I see is Mr. Max Richmond.
Thank you so much, Chair Blair. Thank you to the public who spoke today. I learned so much from your comments and your questions, and thank you to my fellow task force members. If I may, I wanted to share my screen because I was thinking about the numbers that we need to optimize. Are you okay if I share my screen and show a visualization that I've been thinking about, Chair Blair?
Sure, go right ahead.
All right, so I pulled up Microsoft Excel. I use Excel a lot at work to solve problems, data optimization problems. And I just thought I would, in the spirit of unity, explore all of the different possibilities that we may or may not be thinking about. At the end of the day, we have 85,685 souls who are now in Ward 7, whether they like it or not. But it sounds like a lot of people like it, which is good, because I like it. And I've only been here 6 years. But we have some options to figure out, right? Because we need to be between 1,900 and 2,100. So we can have a maximum of 45 SMDs or a minimum of 41. That's it. We're constrained. Those are the parameters. So how does it look today? Today, we have 5 ANCs, each comprising of 7 SMDs, if I've done my math right and checked the website correctly. But does it have to look like that in the future? Not necessarily. We could have 9 ANCs with 5 SMDs each. We probably want an odd number to kind of, split votes and not have a tie. So I looked at 6 ANCs with 7, that gets us at 42, which within it. What about 5 ANCs with 9? Or what about 4 ANCs with 11? I was very inspired by what Mr. Campbell said, that there used to be 11 SMDs. I'm not saying and proposing any one of these ideas in particular. I just want us to sort of be thinking broadly about the contours of what we've been tasked with as we try to solve these problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond. Where are we now? Do we have any other hands, any other comments?
Yes, you have Task Force Member Melissa Freeze with her hand raised.
Okay, I didn't see her hand. Wouldn't want to miss that. Go right ahead.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for your comments, and thank you guys for hosting this. This is enlightening. I just kind of have comments all over the place. I've kind of kept quiet and listened for once in what I'm doing. And just started with Commissioner Blair. Thank you very much. I don't know how much I really know about Anacostia and the and Kingman and Heritage Island, but I keep trying to learn and figure it out. But we would miss Kingman Park in 7D. I will tell you that. Just kind of going through. I know that Travis mentioned about 7B, and you mentioned about Greenway wanting to stay in 7B. I also got the comment from Fort Davis that they want to stay in 7B also. So again, somewhere along the line, someone might be a little disappointed because we're looking at doing this and breaking this down. I know that 7B wants to reabsorb Fort Davis and kind of shift Greenway, but like I said, we have to look at that. Mandela, I was right there with you with fighting for access for East Capitol Street. I was at all those meetings trying to see if we can get access and even get a bike lane up the center of East Capitol so that you guys had access to RFK, because you don't have access to anything. You have access to East Capitol Street, which is death zone. And then Ms. Barnett was mentioning, and also Allison were mentioning about walking their children to school and bike lanes and crosswalks and things like that. And remind me, I'm an old person, and I think of this, there's an old Sting song that says, I hope the Russians love their children too. It was during the Cold War back in the 80s, meaning that I hope that they don't push the button either. We love our children too. We fight for crosswalks. We fight for bike lanes. We fight for, please don't speed through my neighborhood. We do the same thing you do. We are the same. We want the same things. So please remember that looking outside the box, what Max just did was so looking outside the box. I think it's a circle now, but again, we're looking outside the box. We're trying to figure out how we can work this out. We understand that you want to all stay together, and we always all want to stay together. We all want to stay with our friends and stuff like that. But sometimes we graduate and we go to junior high. So we have to kind of think that way. Mr. Campbell, I sat through the 6B meeting that you had with Alyssa Silverman and all the other council members at the time. I think Sheila was there. And I remember you said, and I was gonna put my hand up and I said, let me not, because I usually talk too much and I get too loud. But you said, well, what am I gonna do? I don't know anybody on 33rd Street. What am I gonna say to them? I live on 33rd Street. I hope that if I'm having a problem on 33rd Street, you can look over there and maybe help me out. Okay.
To speak to your issue, my brother and my sister live over there. My brother lives off of 31st Street.
Okay.
And the sister off Vanguard. So
it was so funny that it was so funny that you said, I don't know nobody. I don't know nothing about 33rd Street. I don't want to go over there. I live on 33rd Street. I hope you choose to go over there.
No, ma'am. I did say that the only thing I have in common with the other side of the river is my sister and brother live there. Not that I wouldn't have anything to do with it, but I just want to be clear. It was just that's what I have in common.
Okay, I'm just going with what your testimony was at that very, very long 4-hour SMD meeting that you had, that ANC meeting you had at that point.
Okay.
We do want unity. Like I said, people want to be together, and I understand that. There's going to be disappointments. We're going to have to work together. We're going to have to figure out how to get east, west, north, and south all together. And that's basically it. That's all I have to say. Just a whole bunch of comments and just a whole lot to say. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Co-Chair Blair, if there's no other hand raised from task force member, I do like to make a comment in reference to what you stated earlier, Commissioner Alcorn. Great job, by the way. Also, the collaboration with Mr. Campbell. I want to speak expressly about the significance of allowing DC Jail to remain its own SMD. Number one, the numbers speak for itself. I think you guys did a great job in speaking about the numbers. In addition to the numbers, I think that it would be very equitable for allowing those individuals to participate in my third point, which is civic engagement, which is something that we all want. When you look at my personal story as a formerly justice involved individual, now participating in something that's important and pertinent to all Washingtonians. We have something like this on the inside, allowing those individuals to be able to participate in civic matters and having an ANC commissioner that represents their concerns, which is very difficult for someone to do on the outside now that I'm no longer in the inside. I think it's advantageous for our city as a whole. Think of this point. We have people on the inside from different parts of the city who historically and traditionally have not participated in civic engagement matters. But if they have a seat at the table while they're in the inside, when they transition back home, we can at least think that hopefully these individuals once on the wrong side of the track can be on the right side of the track. So because of the numbers, because of the equitable voice, and because it can also possibly increase public safety, I strongly believe that we need to strongly consider DC Jail and the CTF residents remaining its own SMD.
Well, again, sir, that was my thinking, because as I've said, the issues with the jail are unique to the jail. And anyone on the outside, I mean, I was on the ANC for a number of years and involved with some of those things with Mayor Gray. But again, it was something that I could not relate to or address because I didn't know what the issues were. And and again, this speaks to familiarity as well as understanding. The only way sometimes that you can, as Ms. Blair said, you have to walk a mile in his shoes. So, I mean, again, it's just like being on the inside. You cannot address adequately the issues on the outside, and vice versa. Being on the inside is the only way to be able to understand fully and grasp the concept of what is taking place, how to best address it and correct it if possible.
Thank you, Commissioner Campbell. I saw Commissioner Krepp had her hand, or she had a hand up in the chat. Commissioner Krepp, if you're still there, we would love to hear from you.
Hi. So I've heard some statements over the past few minutes that trouble me. We are approaching hour 3 of this meeting, and several of my residents, 6 Bravo 10 residents, have been on for almost 3 hours, which means, they're not talking to their families, they're not feeding their kids, they're not doing something else. They're sitting here because they want to participate.
I'm sorry. We all doing that tonight because I'm in the middle of it doing right now.
Excuse me, we're not going to interrupt. We are not going to interrupt. Commissioner Krepp has the floor. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
I guess that just floors me. I mean, that's just what I meant to say was, please respect my residents. They're here, they're on the phone, they're talking because they want to participate. So when I hear people say, well, we do this just like you, I understand that. But they want to be here because they want to share the message. And I'm not sure if people are listening to them. All I'm asking you to do is to listen to them and to respect them. I'm their ANC commissioner. I've been fortunate enough to be their ANC commissioner for 8 years. So again, just please respect my residents and please just listen to them. That's all I'm going to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Krepp. How are we looking in the chat? I think
I don't see any questions in the chat, but there is a community hand raised if you want to take it.
Yes, I'll take it. And yes, this meeting is going to 3 hours. Just to bring everybody up to speed, we've been pretty much spending an hour on each commission. So tonight we had 3, so 3 hours is right about where we should be. But if we don't have any other comments after this one, we will be wrapping things up.
Okay, so this is community member Kathy Braxton. You have the floor, Ms. Braxton.
Hi, my name is Kathy Braxton. I actually live on 15th Street, on the side of the street that actually got zoned to Ward 7, which is fine. I'm happy to be in Ward 7. I think my concern with some of the comments that were made, that's been made, is it's almost like an us against them type of, there have been some us against them type comments or Black against white type comments. And I think I'm happy to be a part of Ward 7 at this point in time. But I also support what Brian Alcorn has been stating in terms of his map, with regards to we have certain issues that are common to this part of Ward 7 that I think could be addressed in a much more efficient way. The maps would go on the way that Brian has proposed. That doesn't mean that I don't want to be a part of Ward 7. I do. In fact, I grew up in Ward 7. I'm a native Washingtonian. So I just think that we need to be mindful about some of the comments, because it's not about us against them, Black against white. I'm an African American that just happens to live on 15th Street, that used to live on the Ward 6 side and now lives on the Ward 7 side. So it's more about communities with like issues that kind of want to remain together to deal with the issues from a common standpoint. That also doesn't mean that I'm not still a part of Ward 7 overall, and I'm not willing to work on whatever issues that happen to need, whatever issues we encounter on the other side of the river that might need Ward 7 residents from, this side of the river, the side of the river that I actually happen to live on. So I just wanted to make that point, because it is concerning when we hear these comments. And I think that all of us ultimately want what's in the best interest of Ward 7, the city overall. But sometimes, as in a case like this, there are certain issues that can be better addressed if Ward 6A and Zone 6A and 6B, if we probably had more of a collaborative approach and still, focus on issues like macro issues with regards to Ward 7. So I just wanted to state that. Because one other thing I just wanted to say, I just happen to live on the side of the street where the map was drawn, where I'm in Ward 7. My neighbors across the street are in Ward 6. That doesn't mean that we still don't have very similar issues, or probably almost the same issues.
Thank you, Ms. Braxton. Thank you for those comments. And I think that pretty much brings us to a conclusion for our comments. Public task force commissioners all included. It's been a pretty...
There's 2 more hands up. In the attendees.
Background noise, or am I in?
No, there are 2 more hands up in the attendees. There's 1 hand up in the attendees now.
I don't see the hand, so somebody's going to have to help me out.
It's Bryn Barnett.
Bryn Barnett.
Give me 1 second to get her on. Hold on. Ms. Barnett, you have the floor.
Thank you. Yes, I know that there have been a lot of different comments tonight, and I just wanted to offer that maybe, and I put this in the chat, but maybe not everyone's paying attention to the chat, but I don't think there's any reason that Ward 7 can't create other ways to unite the sides of the river. Aside from having a cross river ANC, and it's not about, I am happy to be in Ward 7 now. I like meeting new people. I like learning new things and finding new places to go. So maybe thinking outside the box, for Ward 7, thinking outside the box would offer an opportunity for more neighbors to engage with each other, discover new things, share ideas, share, find common ground and have interesting discussions. So all of doing that, it promotes unity and it allows the ANCs to focus on hyperlocal issues. So I don't know, this isn't obviously the venue to discuss that, but I just don't want to forget that opportunity is always there. It's always on the table. We can always, the ANC that I was very involved in, ANC 6B, and I, for a while, chaired the Hill East Task Force. That was broader than the ANC. So anyway, that's all. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. I believe that's the last one. Any other hands, Chief of Staff Bond? Do you see anybody else that we might have missed?
No, ma'am. You've covered everyone.
Okay. I just have as co-chair, some closing comments regarding the mapping tool. We had 3 task force members who actually went to the training, and I've discussed this with my co-chair just prior, like 10 minutes before we came on, and we both feel that maybe the public might benefit from a tutorial conducted by one of, or two of, or three, all three of our task force members who attended the mapping training session. So if there's, we might not get an answer tonight, but if the three of it's Justin Leaney, Dr. Oh, she's not here. Dr. Dean is gone right now, but Eric Rogers, if the three of you could collaborate or talk together and see if there's a date this coming week, or 2 dates this week where one or two of you could maybe spend an hour or make yourself available. We could let the task force members know, we can let the public know if they've got questions or they're having difficulties, that you'd be available, and we could set up a Zoom so that people can log in and get some help with these maps. Because while we're having these robust conversations, I'm seeing very few maps from the public, and I think they may feel intimidated by the whole mapping tool process. And if they would feel more comfortable and have someone available to ask questions, that might help us get to the point where we can look at all the maps that have been submitted into the mapping tool, except of course, there's a few that will have to be hand drawn. But I don't want to only see maps from the task force because the public feels that the mapping tool is too scary for them. And it's just an extra measure. I want to go and see if we can meet them, make ourselves available to help them if they're struggling with something. We can circle back to that after our three task force members who have gone to the training have had time to confer with one another and just get back to us, because we're getting to the point where we're going to have these discussion maps. For our next two meetings, the focus is going to be the task force actually discussing the maps and justification. We have to have rationale in this report. We cannot submit a map that has no justification, and it has to meet the parameters of the principles of redistricting. So while we do have two task force members who have been working on putting together a map regarding where the civic associations lie with their boundaries, we may be able to consider that, but we first have to focus on what we are mandated to do. And we may be able to make adjustments around civic associations. We just have to see how that works out, but we can't do that if we don't actually have maps to look at. So the other thing I wanted to touch on is our next two meetings. I'm going to turn this portion over to my co-chair and let him tell us how we're going to proceed for the last two meetings that we will have before we have to have our report ready for April 1st. So Commissioner Castone.
Commissioner Blair.
Yes.
I just wanted to share something, if I could, in response to Task Force Leaney's question before you go to that part.
Okay.
So Task Force Member Leaney made a suggestion, asked a question around the task force making recommendations around operations of the ANC, and just wanted you all to know that in your report that's due to the council on the 1st, the task force may also provide other recommendations with respect to the operation of ANC. So that capability is there if you also choose to make those types of recommendations in your report. So just wanted to share that information.
Okay, thank you. We will take that into consideration, and we don't want to wait until the last week to start working on this report. So that's why I'm going to lead into Commissioner Castone to give us an idea where we're going from here.
Thank you, co-chair. Real brief in the interest of time. We want to make sure we have back-to-back meetings so we can provide ourselves enough time to put together a report. So that's the idea. We know we have the April 1st deadline. We want to make sure that we can be able to come together with it 1 week behind each other and just make sure that we get everything together so we can have ample amount of time to make our submission. With that being stated, please keep your eyes open for the emails that be coming everyone's way tomorrow, very soon, so we can solidify the dates and the times by which we can meet as task force members. With the objective that we can get it done back to back so we can have enough time to be able to make the submission to council members. And I also want to say this also in addition to like kudos to everyone. As our council member said in the beginning, this is a task that we all have been doing, and it's nothing that we take lightly. So everyone, family, everyone, loved ones is recognized, and we want to thank you all. I want to thank Councilmember Gray, as well as every task force member who have sacrificed their time to do this great work on behalf of our constituents and our city at large. So with that being stated, I want to wish you all a good evening, have a good night, and we will be convening very soon. Good evening, everyone.
Good night, all.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Ms. Sheila.
We can only pay you a third.
You are welcome.